Welcome to the Got Trauma Podcast with your hosts, Courtney K. and Monica Newland.
Hello.
Hello.
We're back.
We are finally.
Another episode. I feel like it's been a little bit since we recorded something too.
It has been
posting things. Now we've actually got episodes that are on the internet.
It's very exciting and very overwhelming. And we've gotten lots of really great feedback.
We have. Yeah, it's been nice. So we are back with another episode. And we, like you said, we're not scripted. But we have decided that we're going to talk about emotional triggers today.
Yes.
As this is something that we are, well, for myself, I recognize that I have quite a lot. And I think with having children, that's been amplified.
Yes.
I'm sure just new situations, navigating new situations, I've realized that I have a lot of emotional triggers that are really overwhelming. And I didn't know that until I have been in those circumstances and felt that presence come over me. And yeah, it's been eye-opening to say the least.
It's fucking exhausting.
Oh, it is exhausting.
It's the most exhausting, especially I never even, again, knew what a trigger was. So when talking about here it is again, I did the thing. When talking about emotional triggers in therapy, and it's like, what's an emotional trigger? What does this mean? And the only thing off the top of my head that I can compare it to right now is when I'm at a party or an event and I'm not drinking and everybody else is intoxicated. It's like the biggest trigger for me ever. And I get super anxious, incredibly anxious. And it's almost, if I'm not on the same level as everybody else, I can't do it. And I believe that comes from growing up in a house where everybody was intoxicated all the time and you were not. You're a small child, right? So that feeling of no control comes back. So that's a trigger for me because it's all of a sudden that reminder of being that little kid with no control. It really triggers inner child massively.
Right. And you're not you don't know how to interpret the situation or what to expect, which would be very reminiscent of you as a child being for sure around people who are intoxicated, especially recognizing that, well, these people are intoxicated. And then when you were a child, recognizing that everyone's intoxicated. There was probably a time where you didn't know what was happening and then you clued in, and that would be
you definitely knew that the state was altered. The state, I said again, I'm sorry. You knew that it was altered, so, and that it presented itself unsafe. So then I never understood for the longest time. I think I just started to understand this in the last probably 5 to 10 years, why I would get like that. I would be, out, and all of a sudden I just wouldn't feel like drinking, or maybe I was, for whatever reason I wasn't drinking, which isn't very often.
Maybe you're driving.
Let's be real here. And I'd just be like, oh, I gotta get out of here. Get me the fuck out of here. I can't handle this. Everything is so triggering. And to the point where I would create an anxiety attack. I would be, adrenaline pumping, heart pumping. I'm thinking I'm having a heart attack, and I'm like, why is this happening? What's going on here? And then finally one day it just dawned on me. And it's like, oh, that's why.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I can totally understand that. Makes a lot of sense. Really.
It does. And then it makes it easier now to deal with it now that it's identified. So when I get those feelings that are super uncomfortable and super overwhelming, I'm like, oh, okay, just calm the inner child. Everything is safe. You're the adult now. You've got the situation handled. You're fine. Because as soon as I have drinks, I feel fan-fucking-tastic. There's not a single, thought in my head that's making me feel anything, unsafe. But just I'm here for a good time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's where too you've got to watch, for me anyway, that can also alter my ability to withstand addiction, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Withstand the addiction, withstand like the triggers, like, because one of the important things with triggers is recognizing that you need to address them.
Yeah.
And so if you are going to be in that situation and then you always drink and it sort of suppresses that trigger, I mean, yeah, it feels good in the moment, but it's only perpetuating that trigger.
Well, it's just going to still grow. It's still going to be there the next day. And then for me, it just transforms into anxiety, which is not a fun time. But I can see how not wanting to sit in your emotions, not wanting to identify these things would lead you to just continue to consume and consume and consume. I think the only two reasons why I'm not an alcoholic are because I hate being hungover and because my health anxiety is so bad.
Yeah.
I just can't do days and days of being hungover, and I've never experienced not being hungover. So, and that can go from 2 to 20 drinks. I still feel the same shit way the next day.
Yeah.
But that's
hangovers
honestly
are the worst.
They really are.
And it does really amplify the anxiety. I would agree with that. Totally.
Yeah.
I want to back up just for a minute though. And for anybody who's maybe not experienced triggers in relation to their trauma, just like what are triggers? And triggers can be a person, place, or thing, or a situation that elicits an intense or unexpected emotional response or cause an individual to relive a past trauma. So it could be like a sensory or like any sort of like stimulant that like perpetuates that trigger, that perpetuates that like intense feeling, that causes your body to feel like it's in threat. So I just like read a little bit of a definition just for people who are wanting to know what that is in case you are, figuring out whether or not you have them or not. Most people probably do to some extent. But I think that you gave like a really practical like example of what a trigger is. And it's interesting because this is where our stories are a little bit different, because I maybe at one point did feel like that as well. I think now I really don't drink much at all. And now that's been because of health issues and things like that. I've really had to slow down, having young children and being pregnant, nursing, all of that, of course, goes into it. But I actually feel more relief being sober. And I think when I look back on why that is, I mean, it's like, being sober, being drunk, whatever, like having a good time. Like I have noticed that I'm able to have a really good time when I'm sober now, which I don't think I used to be able to do that. And when I was younger, I was having to take care of people. Like I had to take care of my mother. I had to take care of my brother. I was forced to be like responsible, I guess, in those moments where my mother was just a complete mess. And I almost feel like I have more like ease and control now when I'm not drinking. Like I think almost the drinking like perpetuates my anxiety of feeling like things are getting out of hand.
Yeah.
And I'm almost like, and I'm like, I am like helping to cause things getting out of hand. So I stop myself.
Yeah.
And I end up now like realizing like I'm not even going to drink because I want to make sure that like things go smoothly. And like when you look at the full picture of that, I'm like, why? I mean, that is a good thing, I guess, right? Of course. But sometimes it impedes me being able to have like to relax and to have a couple of drinks and to know that I am in actually a safe space.
Yeah.
When I'm with friends and family and people who I love and care, like this is a safe space. But I sometimes will pull back and be like, have my guard up and be like, well, I'm just going to step back and make sure, because you guys are all engaging in this behavior, I'm going to step back and be like, put that pressure on myself to make sure that things are okay and like be that like caretaker person, which again is also exhausting because I just want to have a good time sometimes. And I realize like this has been a more recent realization that I can't do that a lot of the times. But
well, yeah, that's sort of the hard part. I feel like a lot of the reason I haven't fully um like stopped having a good time using alcohol is one of the longest how do you describe it? Not a personality, but you know how there's like inner child. So this inner girl that I still am very much attached to started when she was 12,
Yeah.
having, drinking and using substance and everything else.
Yeah.
And this girl has lasted with me until now.
Yeah.
So trying to it's like cutting out a very large chunk of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so many things attached to it that I don't 100% know how to completely be free of this person.
Yeah. Or to
So
like strike a balance, because I mean, being
yeah,
sober conscious or being sober curious actually is more the right word. Like, entertaining a life being completely sober. Is that sort of what you're talking about? Or
it is like it's definitely it's very prominent. Like it comes up a lot for me, especially drink. God damn with the ums. Like I'm telling you, it's really hard to not think about these things. Now that it's in my head, I'm having a hard time not thinking about that. I find it difficult.
it's okay. You're in a thought process.
I
People are like,
am.
this is a real conversation, people.
This is true. It's just letting go of this person and being feeling completely safe that once I let go of this person, the person I've become is also is the person I'm meant to be, is the
Yeah.
safest person I have been, if that
Yeah.
makes any fucking sense at all.
No, I'm following you. Yeah.
So yeah, just trying to figure that, navigate that, because I do still like having drinks. I do still like having a good time. It's definitely nothing compared to what I was in my my teens and 20s. Like
Well, we definitely had a good time in our 20s and
was,
teens. Yeah, we'll say that for
just
sure. Which I don't
absolutely
regret any of it.
selfish. I don't either. I mean, parts that I do, especially like with my older daughter, I do regret some of I didn't make great decisions, and I was very selfish and just wanted to take care of myself and,
Well, sure, you were
be
very young.
completely out of my own head. And again, not knowing what triggers were, not understanding why do I want to be out of my head so much?
Yeah.
Because I had just come from this, crazy environment that I had grown up in into the real world, you'd say. And I'm going, okay, well, this life was normal, but everything inside me is going, but it wasn't normal. And we didn't deal with anything. And all these things are triggering you and you have no idea why you're being triggered. So you're just going to turn to alcohol and, whatever else just creates that numbness that, cuts that cord. So you're not feeling all these things that you have no idea how to sit in.
Yeah.
And it was learning how to sit in those. And then I was able to, not carry on nearly as,
for sure,
bad as I did.
Well, that's just it. Like identifying that those triggers exist, right? And then you're saying that later on in life, when you did spend the time and that discomfort of learning, oh, that is a trigger. Oh, that's what this is. Why would that be? Oh, okay, now I can remember that, this is connected to this. Like I, as a child had experienced this, and that's probably why. Like I will say that, having kids and going through, like I said at the beginning, like all kinds of triggers, like all kinds of things came up. As my oldest is about to turn 4, and not realizing that there was so much unresolved. That's been super, super eye-opening. And I'm glad for it. Like I'm happy that that's happening because it is forcing me to move through that. And I'm recognizing it while they're so young. And I'm sure like this is going to continue on, as they get older and as I age, of course. But I'm happy that I'm recognizing so much of it early on and that's because I'm doing the inner work. And, understanding and learning and researching and recognizing that that's what this is connected to. Because one of the things, so I have a 2-year-old and an almost 4-year-old, and they're boys and they're loud. Like they're loud and they fight. And I grew up in a pretty violent home, and that is such a huge trigger for me. And it happens at like all areas, like the kids will come at me, like they're just playing, right? Or they're frustrated, right? As kids
Yeah.
do. But that, like the screaming, the yelling, the hitting, them fighting with each other, them yelling at other people, like that has been so triggering to me because I grew up with like so much chaos and the fighting and the aggression and the name calling and the screaming. Like it was so it was every single day, and it was always out of left field, in my opinion. Like I was young, maybe I didn't understand what was happening, but it was always like so unexpected. And having young kids going through that has been something that's been probably my biggest trigger. And of course, like those situations are uncomfortable for most people, right? Like no one wants to sit in a room with a screaming kid.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about like it hits me different. I think my husband's a little bit, he manages it better because he didn't, luckily he didn't grow up in the same type of environment, but also he grew up with a lot of like his family's larger than mine. Like it's just me and my brother. And he has several siblings. So it was always kind of loud in his house anyways.
Yeah.
Like, so he handles it way better. Like he can kind of sit back and it doesn't bother him, where I like literally like I'm like covering my eyes, like covering my ears. Like it bothers me. And actually a good tip that I was given when I was actually on my wellness retreat, one of the girls there, she grew up in a very chaotic environment as well. And she told me, I know I mentioned this to you before, that just to have headphones, like just have headphones sitting somewhere convenient, like, like little headphones or big headphones, like doesn't really matter, like little ear pods. And when it is like loud and elevated, put them in, because that like sensory overload for me was so intense that just by putting on the headphones, being able to like dampen the, like I can hear my kids still. I can't just like
Yeah.
walk away and leave them. Like they're young, but being able to dampen,
Tone down the
separate word?
sensory. Just
Yeah, like
toning it
tone
down.
it down, like provided clarity for me to be able to pull myself together to, okay, all right, now I can handle the situation, or
Yeah.
oh, okay, now I can calm them down instead of just completely removing myself. Sometimes you gotta just like go to the bathroom and shut the door for a few
Absolutely
minutes,
you do.
right? But like sometimes there's no reason, like there's no reasoning with young kids, right? Like it's tough. So sometimes you got to do that. But that was something like for me that has really helped and gotten that. And then also recognizing that that's a trigger. So now as I, those things continue to happen, I recognize that and I can kind of pull myself through it quicker than I used to be able to.
Yeah.
This is very recent realizations for me too. Like my kids are young and
it is funny. Speaking of triggers like that, I with the girls, this didn't trigger me with Haley. And I think it's because I was still in that state of, I really hadn't opened up this Pandora's box and really knew what was inside it. So with Haley, those things that trigger me with the girls now were never triggers for her. So for instance, being overly touched, like having somebody in my space all the time touching me. And I'm a very affectionate person. Like I love affection, but sometimes it is just so overwhelming. And I had to stop and ask myself, why does this bother me so much? Like there has to be a reason for this. Because I am an affectionate person, I do like this. What is it? And it's the same too sometimes with even, friends, like being hugged too much, or I'm like, what is this? It has to do again with my mom. That
okay.
was something for her, that if I was too overly affectionate, I remember she would say things to me like, if you tell me you love me this many times a day, it loses its what's the word? Like it doesn't mean
like
anything.
authenticity
Yeah, it
or
loses its
whatever.
authenticity. So as a kid,
That's so crazy.
right? And that's what
I say to my kids literally like 100 times a day that I love them. And I interrupt them. I'm like, hey, I love you. Like,
Exactly.
and they are loving to other people. So like, that's just, for me, it just seems like such a positive thing.
Well, it is such
That's
a
so
positive.
sad.
It was, and it really altered. I can remember the day it happened. I can remember how old I was, and I can literally feel my brain chemistry changing in that moment
Oh God.
of being this
Just
very
like,
affectionate, very loving little kid and wanting to be hugged and held and touched all the time, to that just being shut down. And it just created this funny little thing for me that I just recently have identified with my girls. And again,
Yeah.
mainly because the work I've been doing has been, during their, like, before they were born, but more so after they were born is when it really
Yeah.
started to. So the last 6 years. And like I said, it not being triggered with Haley is because she's 21 and I just I wasn't there. Like, I wasn't at that point of identifying any of these things because I still thought that how I was raised was really normal and that
Yeah.
moms are just like that. And I know I really went out of my way to make sure I wasn't that mom.
Yeah.
Even though you can feel those things sort of rise up in you, you get these, I can't even explain. It's an unexplainable feeling. You just know not to act on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's
Like, well, you've
very-
recognized that that's something that is unhealthy or a trigger, and you've been able to like take control
yeah.
of it, as opposed to it being negative and like sitting with you and manifesting like you're moving through that better.
Yeah. Instead of it becoming something that I'm carrying on and then projecting back onto my children.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm grateful in a sense that for some reason something kept me in the dark until I was ready to see that light. Because who's to say that I wouldn't have become that mom to Haley had, something not just kept me, like, who's to say? I don't even know. I know it probably sounds kind of like, what rabbit hole are you going down here? But it's just hard to say. I think everything kind of happens as it's supposed to, as it's meant to, unfold and be seen.
Yeah.
Just sometimes you wonder if something, if something had clicked and I just decided to be the same narcissistic human being that raised me.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you recognize that you don't want to be the narcissistic person that, abused you, like it shows that you're not going to become that person because you recognize that. And I think children are very good at testing. Like, that's their whole world. Like, everything is an experiment. So they test you. And I mean, they don't test you with like your love, because they're just beautiful, unconditional, loving little beings. But they do like offer up all kinds of angles of like, how are you going to react if I do this? How are you going to react if I do that?
Yeah.
Let me push your buttons here, push your buttons there.
Yeah.
And I think that has been something that I waited until later on in life to have kids, which allowed for patience and being maybe more like, I'm definitely more aware of my surroundings, my feelings, and our emotional states. But also, like, when you have kids later on in life, my stamina is just like not what it used to be either.
Oh God, 20.
So
Yeah,
I would
totally
be
get it.
probably maybe more tolerant to things if I had kids 20 years ago, or not.
Well,
20 years ago,
100%.
but
15
a
years
decade
between
ago, maybe.
kids, I've definitely noticed the difference. 19-year-old mom and 35-year-old mom are not the same person.
Yeah.
Not even
And there's
remotely.
positives and negatives to both, right? Because
Exactly.
this certainly isn't about like when is there a good time. They come when they need to come, right?
Exactly.
Or how they come, it doesn't really matter. But
Yeah.
it definitely, it's, parenting is not for the weak.
No, it's definitely not. It doesn't come with a manual, that's for sure.
Mhm.
And it doesn't.
And every kid is different.
Well, exactly. It's not. I mean, it's incredible, and I'm grateful to be able to, come out of what I've been through and identify it and be able to become a better mom and, notice, like, that wasn't necessarily the greatest way to react to something, or because I was triggered, I reacted that way. And then to be, okay, Court, like, you need to dial it back a bit. That's your trigger. That's not their problem. So identify it, move on from
so
it.
deal with it and don't make it about them.
Exactly.
But you got to deal with your stuff. I want to go back and sort of switch gears a little bit, because you mentioned about like your health anxiety. And I can definitely relate to a degree on that too, especially coming out of the pandemic. I think that a lot of people have had a certain level of health anxiety over the last few years. But how has maybe like through COVID and the pandemic or other things that you've experienced, how has how have triggers affected your health anxiety? Or have you, what kind of things have you
Everything
experienced?
triggers my health anxiety. I've had it since, I mean, I've identified with it since I was 4. And,
Yeah, that's young.
you know, I mean, I could watch a commercial about prostate cancer and I'll have 6 of the 10 symptoms and be like, maybe I have a prostate. Like, is this a possibility? Like, that's how crazy that has been for
And
me.
that's what those commercials are to like, that's their intention, is to basically blanket statement a lot of things to make you feel like you need to reach out to those commercial professionals.
I know it's,
That's the goal.
I would
But I know what
say,
you mean.
yeah, it's hard. It's always been triggered. It comes and goes. Um, Finding a community of people that actually experience health anxiety has been probably one of the most amazing and
Ah.
beneficial things I've ever been able to be a part of, just to
Is
know
that
that
like
I'm
through
not alone.
Facebook or what type of
Honestly, through
community?
TikTok. TikTok is the shit when it comes to, I didn't even realize that there was so many people out there that experience. I thought I was crazy for most of my life. So to find out like people, you know, and they're, it's very everybody sort of has the same kind of symptoms when it comes to health anxiety. So I was really like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like that's so specific. Some of the things.
Like some of the health trigger, like some of the
Yeah. Like
triggers that
just
you.
a racing heart
Mhm.
would send me to the hospital. I have to go to
Yeah.
the hospital because my heart is racing. I only did that a couple of times. What else?
And there are like, that's a serious one. Like you can't ignore that. That's not something that you should ignore if you're having,
No,
intense
100%
chest pain or
not.
heart palpitations. Like those are serious
They are,
things.
and that's why it makes it so hard with health anxiety sometimes to identify, is this serious or is this just a manifestation of emotion that I haven't that
Right.
I'm sitting on and I'm not allowing it to surface
Right.
because I'm so used to burying it. And that's what it comes down to for me, and how it's control. I never
Mhm.
had control over anything in my environment, emotion, physical, you name it, no control.
Yeah.
So
Ditto.
of course my mind is going to fixate on this because you
Mhm.
have even less control over that situation.
Right. Right.
So
Oh,
it's
yeah. That's
just that
exhausting.
it is exhausting. I
Mhm.
definitely have a lot more tools in my tool belt over the years that
Yeah.
um, I have really worked hard to attain and use.
Yeah. Like you're incorporating it more into your day to day. Like if you're experiencing.
Yeah. I find if I'm doing things in my right way, what I'm supposed to be doing, it really isn't triggered. I
Hmm.
find it triggers if I'm on, like, say I've got this plan, I'm doing it, all of a sudden I derail myself because I get distracted or this comes up or that comes up, all of a sudden that health anxiety will kick. And I feel like it's that, inner part of me that's like, hi, you're not listening to me. This isn't what you're
Yeah. I'm right
supposed to be
here. I'm
doing.
right here.
So now your mind is just going to take over and give you all these intrusive thoughts. Have fun with that.
Yeah.
Catch you on the other side. Like,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
hard to
Good luck with
describe.
that.
I know.
No, I get it. I get it. I've had both like health anxiety and also health issues that I've needed to take care of. And trying to navigate that is like just fucking terrible. It's really hard.
Yeah. The mind is
And
so
the
powerful.
symptoms, like you said, can be very um like heart heart
Well, they mimic.
palpitations
They
and things
mimic
like that.
real health
They
issues.
do. And that elevated heart rates and all of, like, some of the symptoms that you would experience through stress and anxiety or through triggers mimic something that's more serious. But a lot of the times it is because you have internalized something and you, like, maybe you need to release it, or there is like, okay, what are some of the tools that you're using to come move through those moments?
Um, so if I have a really bad, and I haven't actually had a really bad attack in quite a while now.
That's great.
So one of the best things that I use is a finger oximeter, because if I can show my
Okay.
brain that my
Like
oxygen level and
evidence.
it has to be tangible. If my brain can see it, then I it stops that spinning of intrusive thinking.
Yeah,
Now
it's very practical.
I've seen it. It doesn't exist. And then meditation has been a big one. I use that quite a bit. Doing my
I like the
Reiki.
tapping one. You told me about the tapping
Yeah,
one. I've
tapping
looked into that
is-
more. Like that's a really good one
it's
when
amazing.
you're just to try to, like you're talking about it being like a mindset shift. That's a really good one for you to sort of snap out of
Well,
it
it
and be able to
stimulates blood flow to the chest. So you're starting to, because your body has gone into
like fight or flight.
Yeah, all of your main organs are receiving all of the blood, so you're feeling awful because your body
Yeah.
isn't. It's in fight mode.
Yeah.
So just doing that, I find again snaps me out of it.
So you can be more like get some clarity around, okay, what
Just-
actually is the situation?
Identifying it sooner has been the best tool for me.
Mhm.
Understanding, because before I could be totally just normal, doing the most normal thing, walking down the road. I would have one little thought. It would be the tiniest thought, but it would be negative, intrusive enough, and I would put it out of my brain. But my body's going, oh no, 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 no. What is that? What is that? We need to deal with that. Where did that come from? We
Mhm.
can't just ignore these horrifying thoughts. We now have to manifest them in the body. And I'd be like, what the fuck? What is happening right now?
Yeah.
Haley's leaving, so she was talking to me. I always forget sometimes when we're recording. I'm like, shit. So
oh yeah, there's people here.
yeah. So yeah, that was the biggest thing, was just being able to identify a lot quicker. So
Yeah.
knowing, oh wait, that was a weird thought that just came into my head. Okay, let's that was a weird thought. Fine, you're a weird thought. You can go now. You don't need to come in and sit yourself at my table.
Yeah.
And
Do you like pay attention to media a lot? Because I know through COVID, and maybe call me ignorant, but I chose to remove myself from, like, I was not watching CNN and all the updates and like constantly just like being bombarded with the information about COVID and what was happening, and like so aware. And that helped me to have some balance. I wasn't totally ignorant to what was happening. I'm not talking about like not being informed, but when you like focus too heavily on that, it just like brings up a lot of
you started
unnecessary.
You started to see a lot of like everybody just sort of pitting themselves against one another. There was a lot of that happening.
Yeah.
And I found that very triggering, because sometimes, you think you know somebody, and then all of a sudden they have this, asinine opinion.
Totally different way of looking at life.
And, you respect everybody has their own views and opinions and ways, and that's great. But it unnerved you a little bit, because you're like, wow, this is really causing some serious fucking diversity here.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that was an unfortunate
terrifying
part
in a lot of ways. That's why I definitely pulled back from the social media and didn't watch anything on the news. And offense to CNN, but that's a place of just pure negativity.
I know.
Just is.
Yeah, it's intense.
I understand that news is important, but I find it just such a hard place to watch world events. I mean, it's very informative, but maybe that's the issue for me. Maybe it's just too informative, and maybe
I mean, their whole shtick is to increase like basically anxiety around all of the events that are happening around the world, because that's what sells, that's what gets attention, that's what people continue to talk about, and that's the whole point of it. So it's going to, like, I think the idea is to trigger a lot of people into acting.
I feel like it causes a lot of mass hysteria, right?
Yeah,
and
for
not
sure.
and not that that's, and I'm not saying that that's for everybody. I mean, lots of people watch CNN and don't have the same triggers that say you or I do when we watch it. So it's not judging anybody in that sense, or even CNN itself. I just find, for me personally, I just find it
a little too intense.
A little too intense.
A little too negative.
I said a little too informative. That's not what I meant. I meant a little too intense. Intensely informative, and I'm not good at intensely informative, because it scares the shit out of me. Makes my health anxiety crazy. That's all there is to it.
But like that fear or like phobias or whatever you want to like, we're using COVID as the example, but like that they're going to be talking about a lot of times in the news, those are emotional triggers.
Yeah.
It's creating a heightened sense of fear
Yeah.
and panic and anxiety. And then you tend to have a difficult time moving out of that if you're not addressing it, if you're not
Well,
actively
it can totally down
recognizing
you.
that this is actually triggering me.
Yep.
Let's move through this. And having a healthy sense of, okay, like you can't control everything in the world. You can't control your situation 100% of the time. You can't control other people's situations 100% of the time. Like that is not realistic. But you can like control how you react in some of those
Absolutely.
scenarios.
I think for me, I am a out of control freak. So I really, the things
An
like
out
that.
of control freak.
Yeah. So having zero
I'm
control
listening.
my entire life, and then
Mm.
needing to control people's emotions and, how my environment is. And obviously I still do that. I'm super hyper vigilant about all things. So I feel like because I'm just this heightened
Oh my God, is that
tower
like
of,
what I was talking about at the beginning with me not drinking? Is that like, what did you say? An out of control
out of
freak?
control freak.
I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing when I was saying about, oh no, you guys all have a good time and drink. I'm going to be sober so I can make sure that everybody's okay.
Yeah, I guess pretty much that roundabouts back to that.
Except
So
for that it's revolving under from a healthy reasoning.
well, exactly. Anything that comes at me that I'm like, oh no, and I can't control the outcome of the situation or control, any aspect of it. It really triggers me horrendously.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I just got to stay the fuck away from it. Just stay away.
Yeah, we could literally go on for hours about the triggers.
We could.
I mean, we're going to be referring to lots of them, I'm sure, like as we keep talking and more episodes to come, because there is just so many.
There really is. So we should probably leave it at that for now. Otherwise, we're going to be here for 10 more hours.
We've talked about a few. Yeah, we've talked about a few. I can leave some information in the show notes as well about what some common emotional or psychological or physical triggers, what any of those could look like, if anyone wants information about that. And I think really the message that we're trying to get across is that like things can get better. And when you recognize it and when you're doing that internal work and that you're recognizing that this is what this is, when you're having those like intense reactions to things, that's a trigger, and that you can like you can lessen the impact of those triggers as you're dealing with things and sitting in that uncomfortableness.
Well, you can't control what has happened to you or why you are triggered. You just have to be accountable for learning enough to deal with them. Yeah. And to be responsive instead of reactive.
Yeah, responsive instead of reactive. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, that was good. Okay, well, let's leave it at that. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that. Like I said, we'll put some information in the show notes. And I will say, though, one of the things that we have talked about is creating like a sense of community. So if anybody is enjoying our episodes and wants to be a part sort of the community, let us know, because we are investigating ways, like looking into things as to how we can grow like our community and be a sort of a support system for others, whether that's having people on or maybe discussing like if people want to share what they're going through and us review it or talk about it or something like that.
Well, maybe
either anonymously or not. We're not really sure, but we're definitely open to some suggestions on that.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
and yeah, growing the community and being a support system for each other.
Give us your insight.
Yes, definitely. It's important. So, okay, let's leave it at that. That was a good conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll see everybody in the next one.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to hit those subscribe and share buttons. We'll see you at the next one.